Hello friends. 25th July 2000, around 4 p.m. the Air France Flight 4590 is ready for takeoff. This flight is going from Paris to New York. But this is not an ordinary passenger flight. In fact, it is a flight of a supersonic Concorde. It is an aeroplane that flies at twice the speed of sound. You can compare its speed with a bullet fired from a gun. Usually, the passenger flights in normal aeroplanes take 8 hours to go from Paris to New York. But the supersonic Concorde can complete this journey in just 3.5 hours. Another special thing is that this flight is full of rich people. Flying in a Concorde is considered a luxury. It is not something that an ordinary person can afford. Because just one flight ticket to go from Paris to New York and to come back to Paris from New York costs $12,000. And I'm talking about 22 years ago. If you take inflation into account, it is equivalent to $20,000 today. That is more than 15 lakh rupees for this flight ticket. At 4:40 p.m., this flight is ready to take off. It starts speeding up on the runway. As the plane starts speeding up on the runway, the air traffic controller at the airport suddenly sees that the plane is on fire. He informs the pilot. But it turns out that the plane is already speeding up. And now it is too late to abort the flight. The plane cannot be stopped here. The pilot informs the air traffic controller again. In a few seconds, the plane flies in the air and the fire continues to increase. As soon as he sees it, the fire is out of control. The pilots in the plane try to level the plane. Some engines switch off. It turns out that the plane is not so fast anymore. The people going on the highways near the airport see the plane with their cars. These scenes are very shocking. And in just a few minutes, the pilots completely lose control of the plane. And this plane crashes in a hotel 15 kilometers away from Paris. In this crash, 100 passengers in the plane and 9 crew members were killed. This plane crash shocks the world. People don't believe it. How is this possible? This is our most prestigious aeroplane. The world's top-class aeroplane. Concorde supersonic aeroplane. How can it crash? In the history of supersonic Concorde aeroplanes, this was the first and only plane crash that happened. Neither did any Concorde plane crash before this. Nor did any crash after this. But this one plane crash has changed the history of supersonic planes. It was designed by Britain and France to shrink the world and cut air journey times in half. Supersonic transport is going to be built. We are going to be able to bring the world closer together in a true physical and time sense. In Concorde, suddenly no two places will be more than 15 hours apart. Concorde lived a life of superlatives and contradictions, but just a little too far ahead of her time. The word supersonic is quite related to sound. To the speed of sound. The speed of sound at sea level is approximately 1,236 kilometers per hour. I say approximate because the speed depends on the temperature of the air. If the temperature of the air is high or low, the speed of sound is high or low. But more or less, it is around this number. The speed of a flying plane can be divided into 4 categories: subsonic, transonic, supersonic and hypersonic. Roughly speaking, if the speed is less than the speed of sound, then it is a subsonic airplane. If it is around the speed of sound, then it is a transonic. If it is more than the speed of sound, then it is a supersonic. And if it is more than 5 times, then it is a hypersonic. These speeds are referred to by Mach numbers. Mach number is basically the ratio between the speed of aircraft and the speed of sound. The aircrafts that we fly nowadays, the passenger aircrafts, their speed is around 900 km/h. So, they all fall under the category of subsonic. The Concorde aircraft, and I say that it existed because it doesn't exist today. Why doesn't it exist? We'll talk about it later. It is almost equal to Mach 2. And our passenger jets today are equal to Mach 0.8. As a fun fact, if you want to know the speed of the fastest airplane today, it is Mach 3.3. More than 3,500 km/h. And this fighter jet is Lockheed State Route 71 Blackbird. Its next model, State Route 72, is still in development. And it is believed that in 2025, it will complete its first test flight. And its speed would be more than Mach 6. Approximately 7,400 km/h. In this case, it will be above supersonic and fall under the category of hypersonic. because this category is for Mach 5-10 speeds. Do you know the most interesting thing about supersonic aeroplanes? Whenever aeroplanes fly in the air, a sonic boom is generated. The planes are flying faster than sound. Around normal passenger jets, the sound waves curve like this. But supersonic speed is so fast that the sound waves overlap with each other. Because of this, there is a loud thundering sound, as if there was a huge explosion. This is called a sonic boom. And if you're standing on the ground and a supersonic aeroplane passes by, you'll hear this sonic boom. You can compare it to when you hit a balloon with a pin. The air pressure inside releases very quickly, which causes a loud explosion. The same thing happens on a large scale in supersonic aeroplanes. Many people confuse this with a vapor cloud. The photos you see here show a cloud forming when aeroplanes fly. Vapor clouds form in supersonic aeroplanes, but they can also form in transonic aeroplanes. This is a phenomenon that occurs when a transonic aeroplane is flying in moist air. When there is a lot of humidity in the air pressure around the wings drops very quickly. And the temperature also drops. So the moisture in the air actually converts into a cloud. It often happens that a cloud vapor effect is seen when an aeroplane breaks the sound barrier. But it's not always necessary to see it. Supersonic flights have had an interesting history. You might think it's a new technology. But in fact, humans broke the supersonic barrier. On October 14, 1947, Major Charles Yeager of the U.S. Air Force was the first pilot to fly an aeroplane at supersonic speed. He did this in the Mojave Desert in America. Immediately after this, big businessmen and commercial aviation companies also became interested in supersonic flights. They asked, why only military jets do supersonic flights? Why not make aeroplanes and flights for ordinary people and passengers that can fly at supersonic speeds? They worked on this for 10 years. But in the early 1960s, there was a Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union. So the US aerospace industry focused on space. They were more interested in going to the moon and developing spacecrafts than aeroplanes. So the developments in the supersonic sector shifted to Europe. France and Britain signed a multi-billion-dollar deal and did research. In 1962, a formal agreement was signed between both nations to bring Concorde into being. This one project committed both nations to Europe's largest technological enterprise. On the 29th of November 1962, both governments brought the Concorde Agreement to the world. Under this agreement, both governments would make a supersonic jetliner that would be used for passengers and not only for the military. A few years later, in March 1969, the first successful flight of the Concorde was launched. And a few years later, Concorde became the first supersonic flight in the world, where civilians, not just the military, could also travel at supersonic speeds. The tagline of this flight was "Arrive before you leave," because it could cross the Atlantic Ocean and reach America from Europe in half the time. For Concorde, it is a matter of prestige that till date, it has been the only commercially flying supersonic aircraft. By the way, today, you may be surprised to know that 90% of the aeroplanes are made by two companies, Airbus and Boeing. These two companies have a duopoly in the aircraft manufacturing sector worldwide. Concorde aeroplanes were very unique in themselves. Perhaps the most unique thing about these aircrafts was the nose part. The nose of the front could be adjusted up and down during takeoff and landing, so that the pilots could see and have better visibility. The nose could be drooped down. And when the aeroplane was flying fast in the sky, it could be raised up for better aerodynamics. Its interior was not that big compared to today's aeroplanes. Only 100 passengers could sit inside. Initially, the interior was very simple. Gradually, with time, it became more luxurious. Because it was not that cheap to buy a ticket for this aeroplane. When rich people were buying its tickets, the airlines decided to make its interior more luxurious. With time, things like champagne and caviar started being served in it. And traveling in this aeroplane became a kind of status symbol for people. In the 1990s, the world's biggest superstars, celebrities, sports stars, politicians, all of them, took a flight in the Concorde. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair was also in this flight. During his entire career, the Concorde had a great safety record. There were no problems in these flights. Till date, not a single plane had crashed. It had been more than 25 years since this plane took off. Everyone's safety was taken care of. There was also luxury here. But all this changed on the 25th of July 2000. When Air France's Flight 4590 crashed near Paris. I talked about it in the beginning of the video. 109 people out of 109 people on the plane were killed in the crash. After investigation, it was found that the plane that had taken off on the runway earlier had left a 17-inch piece of metal on the runway. And when this Air France flight came on the runway to take off, this small piece of metal got stuck in its tire. The tire was cut and not punctured. But the small pieces of the tire got stuck under the left wing of the plane at a very high speed. Because of this, a very high-pressure shockwave was created, because of which, the fuel tank exploded. The plane didn't even fly in the air when the fuel began to leak. And because there is a lot of heat there, the wheels of the plane are spinning so fast, the engine of the plane is running. Because of that heat, the fuel caught fire. The air traffic controller noticed the fire, but it was too late by then. The plane couldn't be stopped. So the plane took off. The fire spread very fast. The pilots couldn't control the fire. They tried to turn off the engine. The plane slowed down and eventually crashed in a hotel. And as I said, this incident shocked the people of the world. Because until now, everyone believed how safe it is to take this plane. How prestigious it is. It can be compared to the Titanic. People believed the Titanic to be such a huge plane that it can never sink. This Concorde is such a prestigious aeroplane that it can never crash. After this crash, the reputation of the plane declined a lot. Air France and British Airways decided to temporarily retire all Concorde flights until they complete their investigation. A few months later, in November 2001, they reintroduced Concorde flights. But their business was never able to recover. There are many reasons behind this. The plane had a bad reputation due to the plane crash. This is obvious. But apart from this, in November 2001, when the plane was reintroduced, it was a bad time. We all know what happened in September 2001. The World Trade Center was attacked. After that, the entire aircraft industry went bankrupt. People got scared and stopped traveling in the aeroplane. Apart from this, the plane had some shortcomings. The sonic boom that I told you about, to experience it once, it seems amazing. But if you hear a sonic boom from your house every day, it will become a problem. The people who lived on the ground where this supersonic aeroplane passed through were very worried about it. The noise levels were very high in this Concorde. To keep the noise levels low, what did the airlines do? They said that the flight route of the Concorde should be more on the water and ocean and less on the land. But still, the people who lived near the airports started protesting against the Concorde. Another problem was fuel consumption. Compared to a normal passenger aeroplane, the fuel consumption of the Concorde was 4 times more. It was neither good for the environment nor for the economy. Finally, the last major reason was that the cost of maintaining and operating these planes was very high. For the British Airways, the cost of maintaining the Concorde fleet for a year was £1 billion. That was in those days. Today, it is around £1.7 billion. And if you think from the perspective of a passenger, spending 15 lakhs on a flight ticket to reach early, but in the end, you are sitting on this seat which is not a very big seat, it is better to spend this money on a business class or first class ticket and at least lie down and sleep. You will get more luxury in that sense. Anyway, its demand was not that high, but whatever was left, that plane crash fulfilled it. And when the reputation went down, these Concorde flights started flying empty. Because of all these reasons, in 2003, Air France and the British Airways decided to permanently shut down their Concorde flights. And on the 24th of October 2003, the last commercial Concorde flight flew away. This was the last supersonic flight in the history of the world. Today, almost 20 years later, no supersonic commercial flight exists. Usually, when we talk about any topic or any sector, technology always moves ahead. But this is a place where technology has gone back. Logically, if you think about it, how can this happen? Today, supersonic flights should have become more common. Who doesn't want to reach faster? Airplanes should travel faster. Everyone wants this. But unfortunately, this is the story. But do you know the good news? Today or tomorrow, supersonic airplanes will definitely come back. The shortcomings in this technology are being worked on and solutions are being found. Recently, a startup has emerged named Boom, which makes supersonic aircrafts. And United Airlines, a major American airline, has announced that they have ordered 15 planes from this startup. These planes will travel at Mach 1.7 speed. They have named them Overture aircrafts. If this deal becomes successful and everything goes as planned, then you will see these airplanes on the runway again in the year 2029. 2029 will be the year when we will probably get to sit in a supersonic airplane again. To counter the negative environmental damage, this company has said that they will only use sustainable aviation fuel made of biodegradable material. They have also said that their aircraft is made of net zero carbon emissions. No extra carbon dioxide is produced in this process. But keeping the environmental impact so low, making the price economically feasible and developing the technology with time, is not going to be that easy. But do you know what's interesting? Even if Overture aircrafts comes in 2029, their speed will still be low compared to Concorde. They will fly at Mach 1.7 compared to Mach 2.0, on which Concorde used to fly. Concorde will still be the fastest flying passenger jet in the world. But at this speed, a direct advantage will be that a flight from Dubai to Singapore, which takes 7 hours today, will take only 4 hours in these airplanes.